Hello and welcome to UO Today. I'm Barbara Altman, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Our guest today is Nico Larco, Assistant Professor of Architecture in the School of Architecture and Allied Arts at the University of Oregon. Larco's interests lie in medium to high-density urban design, particularly as it relates to the sustainability of suburban development. Larco brings real-world professional experiences into his classroom and has taught a fringe urbanism studio in which students worked with architects, developers, and planners to develop more integrated designs for an actual suburban multifamily project. Larco is co-director of the Sustainable Cities Initiative, an interdisciplinary research program within the School of Architecture and Allied Arts. Their current project is helping to revitalize the city of Gresham, a suburb of Portland. Nico, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're really happy to have you on UO today. And there's so much to talk about that I want to leap right in by asking you about the Sustainable Cities Initiative and ask you if you can encapsulate what the goals are.
Okay, so the Sustainable Cities Initiative, it's existed for about 3 years, and it's really took off in the last year and a half. With the main idea is trying to work across a number of different disciplines in everything that has to do with sustainability as it relates to the built environment, and kind of the understanding that there's no one discipline that can really deal with sustainability or really implement it well. And so the idea is to get people from across disciplines to really work on projects together, be that research, be it education, or actually be it what we call service, what's actually trying to affect legislation that, that kind of is the framework that we all work in relation to sustainability.
So the goal, as it's articulated in some of your written material, of providing service and technical assistance, part of that is a sort of educative or lobbying function?
Yes, so it's both sides of that. On the one hand, trying to help cities and professionals that have that are in need of kind of understanding how sustainability works or how it can be applied to the work that they're doing, and so trying to educate them in whatever roles they might have. But also at the larger level of what the state kind of legislation and federal legislation, really thinking about how it is that we can help, as I said before, create a framework that really works with sustainability. We have a fantastic opportunity right now with things that are happening at the federal level in relation to livability. The U.S. Department of Transportation, Housing and Urban Development, and Environmental Protection Agency are all working together to put forth kind of livability policy. And so we see a great opportunity to help be part of that process, help help with technical assistance in that process, but then also be maybe a vehicle for getting that out into cities.
So before we turn to the Gresham Project and your local work, actually I'd love to hear you expand on that. Have you been able to tap into this at the national policy level?
So yes, so we've met with a number, we've got the benefit of being in Oregon, which has been working across disciplines and on issues of livability and sustainability for a number of years. So we've got a lot of expertise that exists not only in the university but in the state. And we have a delegation, a federal delegation that is very much in tune with sustainability and livability. So Blumenauer, and DeFazio here in Eugene, Merkley, Wu, they're all interested in these issues, and we've had meetings with all of them and are working to help form legislation, help direct or affect legislation.
So this is something that helps put Oregon and the University of Oregon on the map. We're known as having expertise in these areas?
Absolutely. So the University of Oregon, throughout the university, and I continue to be amazed at the depth of sustainability work and livability work that happens at the university, whereas in other campuses around the country, there will be a person who does sustainability who was maybe hired because they were doing the sustainability piece. Here you just find it everywhere throughout the university. It's unbelievable. So we've got one of the premier environmental law schools in the country. Business has a whole area on sustainability, sustainable business practices. The 3PM, the planning school, really has a long history in sustainability. The architecture school at the university and landscape has a very long history of sustainability, and the architecture school has been for years and years the #1 school for sustainability in the country. So there's a tremendous amount of depth that happens here at the university on these issues.
Is it fair to say that is one of the things that attracted you to a teaching position here?
Absolutely. One of the co-directors of Sustainable Cities Initiative, it's myself, Robert Young in planning, and Mark Schlossberg. And Robert Young always likes to say that it's like Paris in the 20s. If you were an artist, you wanted to be in Paris in the 20s. And if you want to do sustainability, like University of Oregon is a fantastic place to be right now. Tremendous amount of depth.
I love that analogy.
It's a great,
so Eugene
picture.
is the Paris of sustainability.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Now your own background is multifaceted. You are an urban planner. You are an architect, and so you seem to be especially well suited to direct and guide something that is not only interdisciplinary but really multidisciplinary.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. So my own background involves architecture, planning, urban design, and development. Actually worked for a developer for a while as well. Which has been a fantastic kind of, has allowed me to see a wide range of issues that really relate to sustainability in the built environment. I'm by no means even close to being an expert in any of those areas, but what it does let me do is be able to communicate with a number of people who are working on those things. And actually, I would say that a piece of that is just simply understanding that, as I said before, just that no one discipline can really deal with these issues, that you have to be working across disciplines to understand and really affect. If we want to affect how development happens, we have to have design issues, planning issues, economic issues, development issues, but then also legal issues. So, you know, the partnership with law that we're seeing right now is really fantastic for kind of putting forward the agenda and really like moving forward with it.
And even within the fields of design, I would imagine that you need landscape architects, you need people who do the outsides, you need people who do the insides.
Absolutely. So there's a whole range of kind of scales that can be dealt with. What we like to say with the Sustainable Cities Initiative is we work on everything from the window to the region. And so we have a fantastic depth at the university of people who really work on the technical aspects, material issues, embodied energy within materials, the use of materials to have passive ventilation, passive lighting, all these kinds of issues, and then at the same time we have the largest scale issues of whole districts, whole areas, watersheds, how it is that the ecology kind of works with development, transportation issues that talk about where development happens and how things are connected. So there really is a wide range of issues that we deal with when we deal with in sustainability. And Sustainable Cities Initiative we've been lucky enough to really, as I said, have the depth of the university, but also have a lot of different professors from around the university who are really interested and engaged in this and want to be part of it.
In our own immediate environment here, what can you say about the success of the university itself in embracing sustainability design? We've got some buildings on campus, obviously, that are better than many of the older ones.
Yes. So it's been a mixed bag. I think it probably got a lot of really interesting conversations if you went around the architecture school and asked that question. Some projects have really tried to push those issues forward in a really strong way. I think Lillis is a great example of that. On the one hand, for what it's been able to achieve, and on the other hand, just pieces of as test projects of how does this work? How could we try something different? So those kinds of projects have been really, really helpful for the university and for students. I mean, as we teach, going around and showing, being able to look at these examples has been really, really helpful.
So you can work in your own backyard, among other things.
Yes, absolutely.
Before we talk about Gresham, I wanted to ask you if you can actually come up with a concise definition for sustainable city design. Is that a hard thing to ask?
Yes and no. On the one hand, it seems like it's something extremely intuitive, and then on the other hand, if you try to pin anything down, it gets really difficult. In general, it is trying to create areas that are not drains on resources that will continue to exist, for as long as we can look out without harming the environment. I think and typically sustainability is thought of three sides. You have just the environmental impacts, making sure that you minimize that. Economics, making sure that you are economically sustainable, and then also, very importantly, socially sustainable. All three of these things really need to go together. And whereas that's something that's really been understood for a long time, I think for a moderate amount of time, with buildings it really applies to whole cities. And there's been a number of people working for a while on this, on how it is that you can make cities sustainable, thinking about everything from the building, how an individual building might be sustainable, but then also how the entire combination of pieces, which is a city, really might do that. So a very simple example, just thinking about how is it that you get around in a city? Well, part of that has to do with what infrastructure exists, where things are located, what incentives we have to do one thing or another. And all that kind of comes together to create, I think, we'll say, our report card of how sustainable we are within that city. All those of us who make it and those of us who live in it.
I saw you hesitate for a brief minute or a brief moment in your choice of words about how long this has actually been a focus of interest. Can we define a turning point where sustainability became a major focus?
I think I'm by no means a historian of this, and there's other people at the university who would be much better at talking about this than I would. But there definitely was a shift, I think, in the 60s and 70s, which happened around the country. I mean, everything that happened with Earth Day and all these kinds of events. And some federal legislation that came through that really changed, I think, kind of the tenor of what was happening and the way it was thought within this country. I think we're seeing another shift that's happening right now at the federal level of real shifts in policy. As I mentioned before, the things that are happening with EPA, HUD, and DOT, it's unprecedented. It is unprecedented, one, to have agencies working together at the federal level, and two, under this idea, under the flag of livability and sustainability. I mean, it is really a ground shifting that's happening. And we're at the beginning of that happening, and so it'll be very interesting to see how it gets played out in state agencies, in cities, in businesses, as it's all kind of plugged in.
One of the things that occurred to me as I was reading some of your work and the descriptions of the initiative, it actually took me by surprise. It's such an obvious correlation, but I never thought about it. If we design urban environments in a way that are good for sustainability economically and environmentally, it also involves a really positive impact for the individual, right?
Yes.
So if we get people to use bicycles or walk more rather than driving their automobiles, there is a health gain for the population.
Absolutely. So a lot of the research that I personally do on sustainable suburban development, I look at this misnomer of suburban multifamily housing, so high-density housing in suburbia, which actually exists throughout the country. There's 9 million units in the country. 1 of 4 units throughout the whole country is this multifamily housing, and it's typically located right next to commercial areas, which we'll call strip malls.
As a sort of shorthand for, yes, okay.
And the possibility that there's actually making connections between these areas, and we've done a number of studies looking at areas that are more and less connected, and the more connected there are, the more walking and biking that we're seeing, more active travel. And that has environmental effects. We're not emitting greenhouse gases. We're not polluting our surroundings in general. It has transportation benefits in that we're not clogging all the roads with cars and such. And then it also has this really strong social benefits. On the one hand, individuals have the opportunity to see each other, start to create some social capital, some social interactions. And on the other hand, it's fantastic for independence. The young and the elderly who might not have access to an automobile as easily, all of a sudden, with being able to walk and bike, it opens up a whole new world for them. And so exactly what you're alluding to, the creating more sustainable places oftentimes, as I said, really works across all three, environment, economic, but also the social piece of it.
One of the many facets of your academic training is I think you have an undergraduate degree in cognitive psychology,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And that connects to me to the use of the word incentive that you dropped into conversation a little earlier. How do we work the psychological aspect of this to make people want to buy in?
So I have long conversations with Mark Schlossberg from Planning about this, who talks a lot about, looks at a lot of transportation issues. And I think the basic thing is, you have to make it easy for individuals to make this decision. You can't expect for people to make decisions that angle towards sustainability that are a tremendous amount of efforts for them. So take an example with walking and biking. If you make it very easy to park anywhere and to drive anywhere, and gasoline is cheap, and all these other pieces, it makes it very hard to make another decision, right? If you take the same scenario and all of a sudden tax gasoline, if you have parking that's moderate but not absolutely everywhere and free, if you make the connections, the distances between places shorter and more easily accessible and more pleasant to be along, people will make rational decisions to say, well, maybe I would rather walk or bike. For instance, in the studies that I did before about people going to their local commercial area from the multifamily housing, we had a tremendous number of people who in well-connected developments are actually doing the walking and biking. And some of the reasons that they state are, it's easier. than driving. Because in driving, I have to get in my car, I have to go all around, I have to find a parking spot, right? And if there's a connection that's easier, that's why I will walk. To me, that is the ideal that we need to go after. And part of dealing with working at the federal level and the state level on policy is helping create those frameworks that make it easier for these decisions to be made. Right.
So disincentives for the things that you're discouraging and incentives
Absolutely.
for the things that you're encouraging.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Could you talk about Sustainable Cities Year?
Yes, I'd love to. I'm still, every time I think about it, brings a smile to my face. It's fantastic the way that it's going. So Sustainable City Year, if you think about what Sustainable Cities Initiative does, which on the one hand is the kind of research side of what we do, on the other hand is the education piece, and then there's kind of the policy work. The education piece really has two facets. On the one hand, trying to train the future leaders, the students that we have here at the university, which many students come here specifically for the expertise that exists at the University of Oregon in sustainability, but also the opportunity to actually implement these things and train professionals that are out there who see these changes are happening and are trying to figure out how does that affect what I do? How do I implement that where I'm at? And so the Sustainable City Year really came out of that idea, trying to get a number of disciplines together, as I'd mentioned before, to deal with, partner with one city in the state and help them deal with their sustainability agenda and specific projects. There's a tremendous amount of benefit for everyone. From the student side, they get access to real-world projects that are happening, as opposed to hypothetical projects. They get to see actually the political process that's behind some of these things, the economic issues that exist. They have access to the actual community and the members and the community members and city staff and elected officials. It really gives them an opportunity to put the things that they're doing into testing them in the real world. And from the city side, they end up having a tremendous increase in capacity. So we're estimating that somewhere around 100,000 hours of student and faculty work is going to go into Gresham this year, which is the city that we're partnering with. Not only are they building that capacity, but they also have a tremendous amount of education really about sustainability practices, right? In projects they might not have seen as, might not have really thought about how sustainability might come into that project. Students have the ability, and the professor have the ability of bringing those ideas into the city. And the last thing is really that the cities get somewhat of a chance to explore ideas they might not be able to explore otherwise. We're not consultants, we're the university. We do have like a pedagogical interest. We do want to kind of push ideas. And so there's a broader range of issues that the city might be able to address that they wouldn't really be able to if they were just hiring consultants.
In this instance, how was Gresham chosen?
So it's a very interesting story. So we as we were coming up with this about 1.5 years ago of how it is that we would incorporate ourselves, partner with the city, Gresham came up as a fantastic kind of opportunity. We had some professors who were doing work in the area. Brooke Mueller from architecture was already going to be doing work in the area. And probably the largest piece of it was Eric Kavarston, who's part of the Board of Visitors and a really great friend of the AAA, the School of Architecture and Allied Arts, is the city manager. And so we approached him and kind of pitched this idea that we thought we'd be interested in trying. It's kind of funny because when we first proposed the idea, we thought over the year we'd do 5 or 6 courses. Well, Eric grabbed it, got together all of his department heads. We had a huge meeting where he said everything. We had proposed a number of things that we could do, and he said yes, yes, yes. Oh, and also, can we do these other things? On our side, we took that back to professors who had these different expertise in different classes that they teach, and that turned into yes, yes, yes all around. And so now we have over 20 courses that are actually pointing at Gresham this year. It's been a fantastic opportunity for us, proof of concept, a great staff to work with. We met with Eric recently and said that he's not only excited about the work that we're actually getting done, but how the way that we're energizing his staff and kind of bringing new ideas to the table. So it's been really, really good.
So if I understand you correctly, there are 20 classes or more focused on issues in Gresham during the course of this academic year.
Yes.
And then how does that get translated into actual changes in Gresham?
That's a good question. So, I guess I should explain a little bit about how it actually worked. I should have done that earlier. So what happens is we've taken all existing courses except one new course that we're going to be offering this year. So all existing courses, and instead of doing having class projects which might be hypothetical or class projects that might work with one city or another, the idea was to really organize everyone and to point all in one direction. And so these courses are all have contacts within the city on specific projects that have been identified via the city and Sustainable Cities initiatives together. And so the way that these things kind of get enmeshed in what's happening in Gresham is really Gresham's part of it the whole way through. The city is. So for instance, we did a project in the Rockwood area, which is the western side of Gresham, economically challenged area with tremendous amount of opportunity, very suburban, but with a light rail stop that's happening right there. And from the beginning, we were working with the City of Gresham, city staff. We worked with community leaders. We worked with community members, trying to talk about what might happen in this area. This was a studio that I taught, worked on this area, as well as 3 planning courses, as well as 3 of the introductory planning courses for first-year graduate students, and then another course in planning taught by Dan Carroll. And throughout all of this, the city is involved all the way through. All the classes went up there a number of times. Gresham staff came down, and city community members came down for reviews. We ended up presenting the work of the studio in Gresham to a meeting of 75 people were there. We had city councilors, we had chiefs of departments, department heads, community members. So the work throughout the entire process, it's not that we come back and do the work and then give them something. It's throughout the process, there's a dialogue that's happening which helps kind of enmesh the work in the actual work in the actual processes that Gresham's going through. At the end of all that, because there's this question of, and then what? At the end of all that, each one of the courses, we're hiring one of the students from each one of the courses to help put together a final report, which catalogs all the work that's been done, issues raised, ideas put forth, and then that actually becomes a document that we give to the city. So they'll be getting a number of these final reports that document everything that was done during the year, and that they can use that as kind of a foundation for next steps in each one of the projects that they're working on.
It must be tremendously gratifying for the students to feel like they could have some real effect on a real life environment.
I cannot emphasize that enough. So I've been teaching for a while, and I've done most of the work that I've done has always been applied and working with cities and working on real projects. Being part of this larger piece and seeing the work, and part of being part of this larger piece is that the city really becomes engaged, finds projects that they really want to have traction on, and really work strongly with the students on these projects. And the students absolutely react to that. I mean, as I said, the final presentation for the studio that I taught was in front of all these people who make decisions in the city. And some of the comments were, some of the commissioners saying, this is going to be the foundation of how we move forward for this area. This has been a great step forward. It's some of the best work we've seen for this area. And for students, I mean, if the amount of energy that creates, every time that we had a meeting with Gresham staff or community members, it would just invigorate the studio. And so that's on one hand. And then on the other hand, as they present, seeing that these ideas are really being engaged, it is a fantastic experience for them. They start to see that the skills that they're learning have real world value add, can be applied, make a difference. And I think that's like the light goes off.
Yeah, it's really the educational dream come true. It's terrific professionalization for those people, and then they've got a project they can point to. But let me ask you this, do you have any sense of how much of what they've suggested, the plans they came up with, how much of that may get implemented in the long run?
So it changes in different courses. So some courses are more design-based, and those are almost more concrete. The city will have a number of projects that they can actually look at. And so, for instance, in the Rockwood site, there's a couple of projects which they said we are going to investigate moving these forward. Other projects are not as specific. So one of the projects was looking at data analysis. It's a data analysis course, and they looked at livability metrics for the city. And so from that, the city will grab those and then try to figure out how it is that they can improve the work that they're doing, the regulations they have, the development that happens to improve these livability metrics. So it'll have different effects depending on what the projects are.
Got it. Any idea which city will be the focus of the next round?
We don't know, so with the timing right now, it's great because in 3 days we have RFPs due from cities that are interested in being considered for next year. As we said, we went out and asked Gresham to take this leap with us last year. This year we have 5 cities that are interested. So far, we haven't even gotten all the proposals in, but Salem, Beaverton, Eugene, Springfield, and Klamath Falls have all expressed interest in this, and we've met with 4 of those 5 cities who are extremely interested in having this work. So I'll be able to tell you in another month who it is that we're going to be working with, but we're very excited, very excited.
We might have to have you back to talk about the next one when that comes to pass. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but I wanted to ask you about the integration of your own work. You were a practitioner for many years before you took this teaching position. Now that you're fully immersed in this educational project, do you have any time for your own work?
Not as much as I would like outside of like personal projects, but hopefully one day.
And if you did have the time, what would it be? Any idea?
I actually like doing a lot of small scale work. I work at really large scales, and I like urban design, but then I also like doing small scale work, looking at details and making just beautiful things. So I guess that'll become more of a hobby.
Could you give me an example of that? Small scale? At what scale?
So at the building scale, but really paying attention to what we call in architecture tectonics. It's the way that materials come together, the way they might touch each other, and kind of the poetry of construction is what we call it.
Ooh, the poetry of construction.
Yes.
As somebody who teaches poetry, I'm very fond of that sentence. Okay, well, I hope that you're able to bring this around in a way. It's always hard for those of us who are academics to integrate our own work with our practice, but yeah, this has been really wonderful. Thank you so much for talking to us about it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
I can't wait to hear the results. We've been speaking with Nico Larco, Assistant Professor of Architecture and Co-Director of the Sustainable Cities Initiative at the University of Oregon. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.